This is left over from last period, so I'll minimize this. I'll do a really quick review from yesterday, but I need it quiet in here. So please stop the talking. Please put your phones away. All that good stuff. So like I said, we were talking about the difference between quick selection and magic wand. And we were saying that you use the magic wand to select anything that's kind of a solid color. And the other point I was making yesterday concerning that is the fact that when you're doing your background for your boxes like this, you want to make sure that you have your background layer with the template on it. Make sure you have it duplicated and that you are only coming back to this layer to do your selections. Do you see how when I click on this layer, I'm able to select the entire face with the magic wand? That's because the magic wand is good at selecting things that are all one color and that are enclosed in an outline. If I create a new layer right now and just click inside of it with the magic wand, look what happens. Parker, you need to be paying attention. Turn around. You see how it just selects everything because I have this blank layer selected, so it doesn't know what to select, so it's just choosing the entire thing. So whenever you make a selection, it's important to go back to this background copy and that you don't put anything on this. You're only doing, and this will take a little practice to get used to. Sometimes, I mean, even I forget sometimes, but just get in the habit of going back to the background layer to make your selection. Then before you fill anything, go back to your new layer and put any fills or strokes on a new layer. So that way, if you decide later, it's easy to change the color of it, okay? So remember yesterday we were selecting using the wand. The wand is right here. It's the fourth one down. Magic wand. Well, you need to click and hold it. Whenever you see a little arrow in the bottom of the bottom right corner of the button, it's a pull-out menu. Click and hold and it'll expand. Magic wand. And you hold down shift to select multiple faces. You see this? I'm selecting all of these by holding down shift. I need everybody to stop what they're doing and just watch what I'm doing. This is not the time for you to do this. This is the time for you to watch so you understand it. Okay? A lot of you are asking me questions that you would know the answers to if you were watching. Okay? I have just selected all of these faces by holding down shift and clicking using the magic wand. Now I can simply go to edit, fill, and with the foreground color, I can fill the entire thing at once. But here's the mistake that I made, and I did it intentionally to prove a point. When I filled this, I put it on the background copy, which is something that you should not do. I'm going to undo it. Make sure you go to a new layer and then do your fill. Whoops. Edit. fill, foreground color, okay. Now, as you can see, if I turn this layer off and on, it's on a separate layer, and I can get the move tool and move that whole layer. See, all those colors are just on a separate layer. So now if I decide later on that I want to change the color, it's easy to do. If this were on the background layer, and let's say I did something instead of a flat fill, what if I did this? I'm going to change it to the gradient tool, which is down here. The problem now, like for example, because I did this on the background layer, if I decide later on that I want to select this face and do something, I'm not going to be able to do it because, see, the magic wand isn't working, it's not clicking the whole thing anymore. Now, yes, I could hold down shift and spend, 5 minutes clicking all this stuff, but that's really inefficient. So what I should have done is simply I need to go back a few steps. Hold on a second. Alt-Control-Z is the hotkey to step backwards. You're going to find yourself in a situation like this, and here's what you're going to have to do to fix it. I'm just going to delete, and this is why we make a copy of our background layer. It's going to delete this layer because it's too much trouble to fix it at this point. Now, because I have saved my original background copy and haven't touched it, all I need to do is go up here to this menu and duplicate the layer again, and now I'm back in business. Okay? So it's very important that you get in the habit of making your selections down here for your faces on a separate layer, but when you go to actually fill or do something, put it on a new layer. You guys understand that? Okay. Yes. It depends on what you're trying to do. For the most part, I would say make a new layer, but sometimes you can combine, you can do more than one thing on a layer and it'll be okay. It just depends on what it is. The nice thing about layers is that if you find that you're putting everything on a new layer and you have too many of them, you can always merge them like certain ones together and consolidate so that you have less layers in your stack. But it's just a good habit to get into. And some of you guys, this is your first time working with this, so I'm telling you this so that you start building the habits now. So down the road, you'll have better work practice to go by. All right. Now, quick selection is different because it doesn't select based on flat color. It selects on the basis of it just starts selecting whatever pixels are near the cursor. So let me go back and review that. Okay. This is the Robin image. It's just a bunch of numbers and letters. That's what the file's called. So later on, you can go back and find it in that folder if you want to practice on this. All right. Now, remember yesterday I did this Batman image. Remember this guy, Batman character, right? And I very easily was able to take the magic wand, and because he's on a white flat background, click and hold down shift to select all the white space. And then I can select inverse the selection so it's just him. I can copy him and paste him right on the box. Or the other way to do that would have been to simply, let me bring him back here. Just bring the whole thing over, like with the move tool, just drag him over like that with the white space and all, the whole thing. And then go in, zoom in closer, and select the white space and delete it. Either way is fine. 6 of one, half dozen of the other. But again, this works because it's a flat color, and I was smart and very choosy when I went to find these images and tried to find some that were already on a flat background. But a lot of times you're not going to find that, and you're going to have a situation like this where it's like, okay, I want this Robin figure, but I don't want all this background stuff, so what do I do? That's where the quick selection tool comes in instead of the magic wand. See the difference? When you start clicking, you will have a selection that kind of gradually grows as you move your cursor. I'm just holding the left button down as I drag across, and it's selecting these pixels. If I go too far, like if I go over here, like right now it's got his arm selected, but if I go over here, it's going to wind up selecting the whole side. So you got to be careful when you're doing it. You just want to do a little bit at a time, and not do too many jumps with your hand. All right, and pretty soon, with a little patience, you will have the whole thing. This is set to default in an additive way. You can see in the middle of the cursor, there's a little plus sign. That means it's in additive mode. So every time you click, you're adding to the selection. If you want to subtract from the selection, simply hold down Alt, and it turns from a plus to a minus. And you got to have Alt held down. You can't let go. But then you see it starts to take away from the selection, right? So you can, it might take a minute. You have to be a little patient, but eventually you can select the parts that you need. However, before you go to paste this onto your box, you're going to want to clean up these edges a little bit. They might look okay now, but I think some of these edges are going to be kind of chunky and uneven. Now, the one nice thing you can do as well is you can combine selection methods, and I mentioned this yesterday. You can actually go in and say, okay, I'm going to switch from quick select to the lasso tool. I'm going to go in here, click here, hold down shift, and I'm going to smooth up this edge some. The trick with this tool is you got to come back around to where you started. Wait for the little plus sign on that lasso to turn to a circle, and that's how you know where you found your origin point. Click and see how it added to the selection. So if I did this and suddenly held down shift, see how it added to that? Now, some people, when they start clicking and they lose control of this really quick, and they don't know how to stop, they don't know how to find the end. If that ever happens to you, and you don't know, you can't find the starting point, just hit Control, and it will close it off automatically. Hit Control and then click, and it will close it. Okay? I'm going to get rid of all this. All right. Now, before I do any pasting and copying with this, I'm going to want to clean up the edges. Now, it was brought to my attention last period when I demoed this that this is going to be different on your computers than on mine. All right, on my computer, because I'm using an older version of Photoshop, if I go to select refine edge, then I get this whole bunch of ways to see how it kind of isolates the foreground from the background so you can see the edges better. I can see kind of where I need to clean things up. If I adjust the smoothness and the contrast, see how much sharper that edge is now, like on his arm? Bump up the contrast a smidge. And shift edge will either bring the selection out by several pixels or inward by several pixels. So see right now, I want to get a little bit of that black outline on there. So I'm going to shift the edge out, hit OK. Now you see how much cleaner that selection is. You don't want to make it too smooth, but this looks pretty decent. And again, if I want to go in and let's say there's this little piece of his hair that I want to bring in, go back to my polygonal lasso, hold down Alt, and I can take that little chunk out of his hair like that. All right, now that looks pretty good. Now I can go Control C to copy, go back to my template, Control V to paste, and there he is. Get the move tool, move him around. All right. There might be some color things I want to do. There's some things down here I'm not happy with. I might go back and actually take this out. See, here's a chunk I forgot. I wasn't being careful. But that's okay. I can just go with the marquee tool, select that. Just a smidge. And then just hit delete. And it's gone. And I don't really like this either, so I can go to the polygonal lasso. Hit delete. Now let's zoom out. Got a little bit there I need to clean up, but not bad. So now Control D to deselect. Now I can move this, scale it, do whatever I want. Now his feet are cut off, so I'm going to want to probably put him somewhere on the bottom or have something in front of his feet to hide the fact that he has no ankles, but pretty good. Does that make sense? So that's the main difference between using Quick Select versus the Magic Wand. All right. Next up, the crop tool. The next one down on the list. So we've done these four. Remember yesterday we did move and then these three selection tools. Now the crop tool. Basically you click and drag and it looks just like a selection, except what it's really doing is resizing your file. So if I were to hit enter on this, see that? It totally cropped my image, which is something I do not want. Now, sometimes people do this on accident. They get the crop tool and they think it's the marquee tool, and it's not. And they freak out once they see what happens. Just undo it, Control Z. The key is whenever you make a mistake in Photoshop like that, don't freak out and start doing lots of clicking, because that's going to really use up all your undos, and you don't want to do that. Just stop what you're doing, don't touch anything, and just hit Control Z, and that will usually solve the problem. All right, so that's all the crop tool does. You don't really need it. The eyedropper tool is used for sampling colors. All right, if you look down here at the lower left-hand corner of the screen, you're going to see those two colored squares. I believe I mentioned them yesterday. Those are your foreground and background colors. Right now, red is my foreground and blue is my background. And if I click this little curved arrow, I can switch between the two of them, right? If I want to change the color, of my foreground, I can do, and when I say foreground color, what that really just means is that that's the color that's currently going to be displayed if I do a fill or a stroke, or if I get my brush or pencil tool and start scribbling. That's the color that's going to show up. It doesn't mean the whole foreground is blue. All right. If I want to change that color, I can double click on that square and it brings up my color picker, and I can slide to different colors. And then once I pick a color in a certain range, I can go in and, do darker or lighter. This top square is the color I'm currently selecting. The bottom square is the one that I currently have. So this is what I'm changing it to. This is what I currently have. These numbers here, RGB, CMYK, these are just numerical values for color. All right. If you are a graphic designer or you're working in print in some way, and you tell someone, hey, I want the cover of this book that you're designing for me to be light green. And you're like, well, okay, but there's like about 1,000 different light greens that exist that I could use. Which one do you want? So what you can do is say, okay, I want these specific values, these, specific CMYK, and notice that when I drag this around, see how the numbers change, the values change. So you can actually write down, okay, I want this specific RGB value, and then they can just punch that in and it'll take them to the exact color and say, okay, that's the one to use. So it just helps to categorize and identify the infinite number of colors that are available. RGB is something that you would use more for web design and digital arts. CMYK is more for something that you'd want to do for print, I think. That's the way that goes, unless I kind of think about it. All right. Anyway. Oh, you know what? I forgot to mention something. I just now realized. I'm sorry. Earlier when I said, remember when we were doing the select color, I mean that's the color range, the refine edge thing for this? I forgot to tell you what that was on your computer. On mine, it's known as select refine edge. On yours, it's going to be something like select and mask, I think is what it's called. You guys see something like that on there? Okay, that's what it is. So just make a note of that. I'm sorry. And again, I had no idea that Adobe had changed that until this morning, and someone pointed it out. Because they were looking for it, and they're like, I don't see that there. Adobe has this annoying habit of, arbitrarily switching things from version to version, so that you just can't find it anymore. And like it's like you want to do something the way you've always done it, and suddenly you have to learn a new way because they've decided to change a menu or a button. Anyway. All right, so the eyedropper tool. Back to that. Sorry, I'm being really lame-brained about this. So that's how you change the colors, foreground and background colors. But watch what happens. Keep your eye on this little green square when I start clicking with the eyedropper tool. See that? Wherever I have my cursor hovering over, it is changing the color. So this is how, like, if you are using a certain color in your image and you want it to be consistent, but you don't remember exactly what color it was, just use the eyedropper, click on it, and it will take you to that exact color. And that way you can have things that match. This is really helpful, like especially like when I color my comics and stuff. Sometimes I want to create palettes and create swatches that are more natural, not really bright. So I'll get like actual photographs from life, and I will use digital photographs, and I will actually use the color picker to go in and select colors from photographs to have more naturalistic palettes. All right. So that's the eyedropper. You don't need to worry about any of these other things. The ruler, the note tool, those might be useful, but we got enough to learn. All right, the spot healing brush and the healing brush, we don't need to worry about that, so you can ignore that tool. The brush tool is also bundled with the pencil tool. And that basically just, the difference between brush and pencil is the brush gives you a soft edge, pencil gives you a sharp edge. And that's it. So I've got yellow selected here. Oh, I've got my layers turned off. That's the problem. Let me create a new layer. So here's the brush tool. Let me make my cursor bigger. Remember, you can change the size of your cursor by using the bracket keys next to the P key. Left bracket makes it smaller, right makes it larger. See how soft that edge is? That's the brush tool. Now the pencil tool is a different. I just have a different kind of pencil picked right there. That's all. All right, there's the pencil. See the difference in the edge there? Okay. The other cool thing with the brush tool and the pencil tool, which is kind of neat, is that you can make your own brushes. You can make custom brushes, and you can also buy brushes online and install them and load them into Photoshop. And a lot of artists buy custom brushes that go in and they simulate certain paint strokes and paint techniques and inking techniques. And a lot of people use digital brushes for doing digital comics and stuff like that, digital illustration. All right. The clone stamp. This is a fun one. The clone stamp will select and sample from any part of an image or layer, and it will then replicate it in another part of that layer. So it's good for duplicating things. I'm going to try to find. I have so many of these folders open that I don't need. Let's open up this file. And we'll show you how the clone stamp works. Got another Robin. All right, let's say I want to move Robin symbol from the right-hand side to the left-hand side. I'm going to select the clone stamp. I'm going to hover my cursor over the area that I want to sample from. I can even make it a little bit larger if I want. Now watch what happens to the cursor when I hold down the Alt key. See that? Hold down Alt, and it turns to a little crosshair. Left click once on the area you want to sample from and let go. Now when I move my cursor, that area appears inside. And I can change my brush size. Okay. Now wherever I click on the image, it's going to paint from that image. So look at where the R is, and you'll see a little plus sign that's showing where it's actively sampling from. Now I can go and sample from this red and cover that up. All right, so you see how that works. You can just sample images. This is good. This is really handy. Like, let's say you're trying to change the background. I want to add more segments to the background. I can select that, sample from that. So like, let's say you're doing an ocean scene or something like that, like on a Finding Nemo box, and there's just a couple of bubbles and you want to add more bubbles. You can use this clone stamp to sample one bubble and paint them everywhere to make it look like there's tons of bubbles or tons of seaweed or whatever, rocks, you name it. All right, does that make sense? I mean, you can even go to more extremes and you can actually like click this over here and, give Robin like 2 heads or something. Right? So that's the clone stamp. Okay. Next up is the history brush. You don't need to worry about that. The eraser tool does exactly what you think it does. It just erases stuff. So let's say I go to this layer here, layer 7. I get the eraser tool, make it a little bit larger. Let's take my opacity up to 100. All right, it's just erasing what's there. Now, the nice thing about it is that you can actually take the opacity of it down, get yourself a nice large brush size on your eraser, because it works very similar to the brush tool in a lot of ways. And you can actually go in and I can start erasing like the bottom half of Robin. And because I have the opacity turned down, it's doing it very gradually. And you can get some kind of soft fade effects. That's kind of nice. See that? So that's kind of cool. So that's the eraser tool. All right. Starting tomorrow, we will do the gradient tool and keep working our way down the toolbar and talk more about layers and image adjustments and all that. Okay? Any questions? Okay. Now, your homework is to not only keep working on your paintings. If you haven't finished those, I'm going to collect those on a week from today on next Wednesday. But also start thinking about what you're going to do for your box. What's your theme going to be? And start sketching out thumbnail sketches like we talked about on Monday. Start doing sketches for your box, the sides of your box. Yes. Pretty much, yeah. I guess, but all right, yeah, here's the thing. You want to pick something that has good characters in it, because what you're going to do is you're going to make your toy, and your toy should be based off of a character. Now, you could make up your own character. Yeah. Or I mean, like if you wanted to do just shoes, but create a shoe character and do something like that, you could, I guess. But all right, have a good day. We'll see you tomorrow.